Welcome back to Through the Veil podcast with Elle and Camille. I'm Camille.
I'm Elle.
And this is the podcast where we seek to demystify, develop, and celebrate our spiritual gifts through a faith-based lens. And today we have Jeffrey Olsen with us. I had the pleasure of meeting Jeff back in November. I went to a gratitude evening. He was a speaker at this impact event, and he shared his near-death experience with us. And it was a nice opportunity. It was a smaller, more intimate group, probably like 30, 40 people there. And so afterwards, when I had the chance, I shot up to him and said, "Hey, this was so incredible. Thank you for sharing. Would you like to be a guest on my podcast?" And then later I went home and I Googled it and I was like, holy cow, he's been on like the Tony Robbins podcast. And he said yes to me. So it was just really great luck. Jeff, can you introduce yourself a little bit more? Tell us about yourself.
Oh, thank you. And it is an honor. It is an honor. And yes, I've done some interesting things. My name's Jeffrey Olsen. My friends call me Jeff. I am an author. I am a speaker. Interesting enough, I never set out to be that. In my job, I'm a creative director. And gosh, I'm a father. I'm a pretty normal guy.
Yeah.
And I've just been given some really beautiful opportunities, which has not come easily. There's been what many would call tragedy, and we're going to get into all that, which has provided huge opportunities for growth. And that's where the insights come and the near-death experience. And I want to be clear about that. I couldn't even talk about it for a decade. I mean, it was so personal. It was so painful. And I didn't want people to think I was crazy, or that I thought I was special in some way. It took a while, but I can talk about it now. I can speak openly. I still sometimes cry. It is very personal.
I cry all the time.
Yeah.
But it's been 30 years since my near-death experience, and yet it's opened doors that have not shut, and that's been a blessing. That's been a blessing. So in a nutshell, that's me.
Yeah. There was a quote I wanted to read as kind of a backdrop to what you're going to share. It says that pain can often be the carrier pigeon of wisdom, and wisdom brings peace. But make no mistake that both come with a price and are found only at the end of a path every soul chooses to travel.
Yeah, that's from knowing. That's from knowing.
Mm-hmm.
And that is very true. And pain comes in many different forms. I mean, certainly physical pain. I still deal with intense physical pain. However, emotional pain is far deeper, far heavier to carry than physical pain. And fortunately or unfortunately, I've had my fair share of both.
There's a really beautiful concept in Buddhism that it is only through the pain that we can achieve wisdom. Like, our human world is designed to be uncomfortable. And through that discomfort, you can only achieve enlightenment by embracing that discomfort and moving through and then beyond that discomfort. And I think it really is a true principle universally. And it's amazing how often blessings coincide with tragedy or trial. And it's only once we experience the full spectrum of human existence that we can, transcend human existence and find heaven. And so I would love for you to start off with your experience and build us some context about this wisdom that you've gained and about all of how it shaped your perspective, maybe after having the experience that you did.
Yeah, happy to share. And so beautifully put. I mean, it's not that we're here to suffer. We are here to get the full breadth and depth of the human experience, and the tragedy, the pain, the grief seems to create reservoirs wherein we can experience more joy, more bliss, more peace, and yeah, that does come sometimes with the price. But the experience, the near-death experience, I'll go back 30 years ago, and it was an automobile accident that caused my near-death experience, and it was a family vacation. We had gone from northern Utah to southern Utah, to see the beautiful Red Rocks and to visit my wife's family. Her parents were down there. Her grandparents were there. And it was also the Easter weekend. And so we went down and we celebrated a beautiful Easter, all the traditional things in our families. I mean, we would hard boil eggs and then color them brilliant colors and hide them out in the garden. And the kids would go racing out on Easter morning and find the eggs. And there's just brilliant memories about that weekend. And Monday morning came and it was time to go home. And, we lingered. Gosh, grandma had made breakfast. It was all the family togetherness. And one thing I'll always remember about that day is we said our goodbyes. We hugged everybody. I loaded the luggage in. We got the kids loaded up and in their car seats. And we waved goodbye, and we were literally just pulling away from the curb. And my wife, Tamara, suddenly said, "Stop, wait." And I thought she had forgot something. I thought she was going to say, "Oh, my handbag's in the kitchen," or whatever. It was that urgent, like, "Stop, wait." And I looked at her and she said, "I just want to go say goodbye to Mom and Dad one more time." Now, in that moment, I thought, "Oh gosh, come on, we've said our goodbyes. Let's get on the road." But I watched and noticed as she jumped out of the car and she ran up to the porch, and there was Grandma and Grandpa, her parents waving like they do. And I watched as she not only hugged them both, but she kissed them. And it's not that was abnormal or out of the ordinary, but here was this very ordinary thing. And I watched as she did that. And then she come running back to the car. And, based on the way the day rolled out, that was the last goodbye. But the reason I bring that up is she must have had an inkling, a thought, an idea, call it intuition, an impression. Hey, wait, stop. And what I love about her is she acted on it. She got the feeling, she got the whisper, and she acted on it. And that was and is very meaningful to the entire family, that she got that last goodbye, and she jumped in the car and we went out to the interstate, and I cranked the cruise control up to 75, which is as fast as I could legally go. I was in a hurry. It's like, I got to get home. I'm missing a whole day of work. I want to get home. I want to get everybody unpacked. I got to get ready for the next day. And even I had a moment. I mean, I'm racing up the interstate, and there was this brief moment that I just looked in the rearview mirror, and it's literally a moment. It's just to see what traffic's doing, if there's traffic. And in that brief glance, I happened to see my youngest son, Griffin, in his car seat, and he was sound asleep. And it's as if time just stopped, like it just stood still. And I saw this little boy, which was our miracle boy. After our first son, there was complications. We were told we may not ever have more children. And so he had come, this miracle baby. And he was a toddler. He was 14 months old. But I saw him. I felt him. I mean, I noticed details, even in a moment, in a glance. I noticed how long his eyelashes were, and how his little hands sat up on the little, tray of the car seat. And it was, in seeing that, then behind me, I heard Spencer, my 7-year-old, and he was playing with action figures that he had gotten in his Easter basket, and he was having the grandest lightsaber battle in the universe. And I was just surrounded with, gosh, look at this beautiful little miracle son, and feeling the joy and the noise of, my 7-year-old, all the joyful sounds of a little boy. And then I just glanced at my wife, who she had also reclined her seat back and was sound asleep, yet she was still holding on to my hand. And I had this profound moment, call it intuition, call it impression. I thought, wow, we're 10 years into this marriage. We're chasing careers and raising these boys and just busy, busy, busy. And she's still holding my hand. I had this absolute moment of gratitude, just peace, just like, wow, look what I'm surrounded in. Look, what did I do to deserve this? It was an absolute profound moment of gratitude. And, of course, my attention went back to the road, and away we went. And maybe that was my whisper, because about an hour after that is when it all came undone. And there was reports of crosswinds. There was reports of a red pickup truck that was driving erratically on the interstate. The hardest part of the story is I believe what happened is I may have dozed off at the wheel. I may have just nodded off. Not like I fell asleep, but just nodded off. And there's no excuse for that. I mean, I think back, I was 33 years old. I was running my own advertising agency. I was a young father, the pressures of a man to provide, protect. And I was doing those 12, 13, 14, 16-hour days. And of course, we'd been on vacation. We'd had a break, but I believe I just kind of nodded off. And in doing so, I swerved to the right and I overcorrected to the left, and I lost control of the car. And as I swerved, the car then began to roll, not off the road, but down the road, down that hard concrete at 75 miles per hour. And it was a horrific accident. I mean, the accident reports say the car rolled no less than 6 to 8 times. I blacked out for the actual rolling. However, when the car came to a stop, I was completely conscious. I was aware, wow, we crashed. And the first thing I heard was my 7-year-old son crying hysterically in the back seat. And I'm like, I got to get to my boy. I've got to get to my son. And that's when I realized I couldn't move. I mean, I was pinned. And I realized I was struggling to breathe. I mean, there was intense pain, but the adrenaline was so high. I wasn't aware of my injuries and what had happened. I mean, actually, both of my legs had been crushed. My left leg was eventually amputated above the knee. It had been crushed so badly. My rib cage had been damaged. My lungs were collapsing. My right arm had almost been completely torn off. The seat belt had cut through and ruptured all my insides. I mean, I was an absolute mess. But I wasn't aware of that. I just knew, boy, my son's crying. I've got to get to my boy. And that's when I realized that no one else was crying. And, even though it's been 30 years, it's still, I mean, I knew, and I was aware, and I saw, and I knew that Tamara, my wife, and Griffin, my youngest son, were gone. They were killed instantly in the accident. And I knew that. I don't go into the details of what I saw and what I knew, but it was the darkest. It was the darkest hell, a man could ever be in. I mean, here I am pinned. I'm losing consciousness. I've got a hysterical child that I can't get to. And I was driving the car. Yeah. I mean, the guilt, the regret. I kept thinking, can't I get those 3 seconds back? And I discussed that not to be morbid or graphic, but that was the setting when it went out, it went black. However, as I lost consciousness, light came. And I was completely conscious. I literally felt light come to me. Light rushed and surrounded me. It was like a bubble of tangible light. And it felt as if I was rising above the accident scene. And I was a little confused because suddenly I could breathe. I'm like, I can breathe fine. How can I possibly be okay? What happened? What's going on? And then in that light, Tamara, who I knew was deceased at the scene, suddenly she was in that light with me, right there with me. And she was very much alive. She wasn't injured. She didn't display the injuries I saw in the accident. She was gorgeous and illuminated and yet emphatic. She kept saying, Jeff, you can't stay. You can't stay. You've got to go back. You've got to go back. And it was an intense interaction. I mean, as intense as it would be in this realm, I suppose, but there we were, and and the senses were multiplied. Like I could taste her tears. I mean, and she was emotional. I mean, it wasn't, it wasn't,
easy.
I mean, it was like, you got to go back. You got to go back. And for whatever reason, she couldn't. But we literally had a conversation where if I stayed with her, our 7-year-old would be orphaned. And Griffin, my toddler, was no part of this experience or conversation at this point, but it was just she and I. And we made a choice that I would go back. And there was urgency. She kept saying, you got to go. You got to go. You can't stay. And I mean, I know it. I mean, she would push my chest away and say, "You've got to go. You've got to go back." And then she would pull me back in, and we would cry. I mean, it was an intense exchange, and we made a choice. I was coming back, and that's the most intense goodbye I'll ever say. And it was interesting because I didn't have to figure out how do I get back. Once the choice was made and the goodbyes were said, our thoughts are so powerful. It's like, okay, I'm going back. And then, whoosh, it felt like I was just transported, if you will. And suddenly I found myself moving about a very busy emergency hospital, level 1 trauma center. I have no concept of time in this bubble of life. I later found out people arrived at the scene. My 7-year-old was banged up pretty good, but he basically walked away from the accident. I had to be extricated from the car. I was pinned beneath it. They had to life flight me or airlift me to the nearest level 1 trauma center, but I was unaware of any of that. All I knew was I'd crashed the car. Half the family was gone. We'd made this decision. And I was now moving about a very busy level 1 trauma center. And as I was doing that, I was so aware. I mean, it's like I had 360-degree awareness of everything.
Yeah.
The doctors, the nurses, even the other patients, even the families of the other patients. It's like I was connected. And I knew, well, for instance, a nurse passed me, completely unaware of me. Now, I'm not in my body, mind you. I mean, my body's...
Right.
But I see her, and I feel her, and I know her, and I know everything about her. I know her love, her hate, her challenges, her motivations, her thoughts. And I was aware of her life. Like I felt and knew almost like it was my own. I felt the abuse that she had received and experienced as a child. Horrible abuse. And yet in that same instant, I'm like, look at her. Look at the magnificence of her soul. She's here in a hospital, serving, healing, helping. And this was true of everyone I saw, and I was aware of so much in every soul. It's like I feel them. I see their magnificence, and I knew I was seeing them as God sees us. I was seeing them with such love, such profound love and connection and knowing, until I came upon a body or a man lying on the gurney that I didn't feel anything from, which was really weird given this connected experience I was having. And so I stepped closer and took a look. And that's when I realized, oh my gosh, that's me. But it's not me. I'm having this profound connected experience, but there's my body. Yeah. There's the skin suit that I had been going through life in, and it was so banged up. And this was profound. I might spend a little time with this. So I stepped closer and looked, and like, there's my body. And it was like there was a narrative. It's like there was a guide, and I was literally told, your body is the temple. Like, I had heard that in my life and growing up, and it seemed like a beautiful theology
story.
But here it's like, wow, I took it for granted. I I didn't realize that I didn't have to remind my heart to beat. I didn't have to think about my lungs breathing or teach my eyes to see. I was looking at this miracle machine, this tabernacle, if you will, of a body, and thinking, what a gift. How did I take it for granted? How did I not realize what a beautiful, magnificent thing this was? And yet I also knew I've got to get back with it. I've got to get in the body or with the body. And mine was so broken, so miserably broken. And again, our thoughts, our intentions. It's like, I got to get back in it. It's not like I had to figure out, how do I lay down and get back in? No, I just knew I'm going back in. And then wham, back in the body. And so heavy. And back to the pain, the trauma, the grief, the regret, the guilt. It was so heavy being back in the body, and so painful, both physically and emotionally. And I was ventilated. There was a big tube down doing the breathing for my lungs. My legs were immobile, having been crushed. My right arm was immobile, having been torn completely out of socket. And I learned a whole new meaning to be still. I had no choice. I just laid there wallowing in it, and also contemplating this experience. And there's a unique part of my NDE that I'll share here too. I was in the hospital for almost 6 months. There was 18 surgeries in all, putting me back together.
There had to have been, that's extensive damage.
Yeah.
It's not a brief experience.
Kind of a Frankenstein.
There's repercussions.
Yeah, kind of a Frankenstein ordeal getting me patched back up. But there was a surgical team. The trauma team, where I was life flighted into. And I was in ICU for, weeks, months. It was a long time. And I had horrible infections because of the seatbelt rupturing everything. And I was throwing pulmonary emboli, or the blood clots that lodge in your lungs. And so I would be in ICU. I might get out for a minute, and then I'd go back into ICU. But at one point, they began to allow visitors in. Only immediate family was allowed to be with me for weeks. And only one or two at a time. I was in ICU. But when they finally started letting visitors come in, people from the neighborhood, the guys and gals from work, my closest friends were all coming in, and this couple came in, or I thought they were a couple. It was a man and a woman, and they weren't in scrubs. They were in regular clothes. And I kept thinking, gosh, I can't place them. I was still very sick, but I'm like, I don't remember these people. I don't recall them. And I'm thinking, how, you go through the hard drive, like, where do I know these folks from? But the young lady sat down and she said, we were members of your original trauma team. And I'm like, wow, and you've come to see me? And that's kind. And it was small talk at first. And the man kind of was over leaning against the wall. And I realized they're not a couple. They're workmates. They work together. And anyway, she said, gosh, we're glad you're doing so well. We weren't sure if you were going to make it. And then she started to cry. She got emotional. And she said, actually, we've come, we have to tell you what happened in the surgical arena. And she could barely get it out, but she said, your wife was there. Now, they didn't know me from Adam. Yeah. And they didn't know I had an experience. And it took a great deal of courage. And the nurse was the one. She was the catalyst. We got to go tell that guy. We've got to go tell that guy. In fact, the doctor, he's like, no, we don't. We don't have to tell a stranger that we saw, we're not going in there. But I guess she twisted his arm and got him to come. But as she was sharing this, I looked at him and he just acknowledged, yeah, he says, I'm Dr. O'Driscoll. And she was there. And he said, we saw her soul. It was there with you. And he said, she communicated with me. And I said, wow, what did she say? And he said, well, she simply shared her gratitude for everything we were doing to save your life. And I just burst into tears. I said, of course she did. That's who she is. But I realized they had no idea the deal we had made. They had no idea that I had said goodbye and said, I'll go back. And I suppose she came with me. And she was like, you got to save him. And so she was sharing gratitude. And the doc and I have actually become very good friends. It was at that point I said, wow, I had a profound experience as well. And he, it's funny. He listened. I mean, at the time I thought, if I share this, he's a doctor. And if I'm nuts, he'll put me in the psych ward, and get me the help I deserve to have. But he listened, and we became dear friends. And he had many spiritual experiences in the ER. And I don't mean to digress, but that was like here I was having a near-death experience. They weren't. They were very healthy. I mean, skeptics would say, well, the oxygen was cut off to your brain. You were badly injured. You began to hallucinate, and this is what is going on. But they weren't dying, and they were very much awake and alert and alive. And they had this profound experience where they saw Tamara in the operating room as they worked on me. And the doc was like the attending physician. He wasn't actually like hands-on working on me. He had come to oversee it, and there was whole teams of surgeons. And he said, had I been working on you, I may not have had the awareness to be aware of what was going on, but because I was simply overseeing it, he had a profound experience. Anyway, that's a bit of a side note, but it's interesting that other people had an experience at the same time I was having my experience, and the courageousness for them to share it. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that as an appendage to your experience, because one of the things that Camille and I like to hit on all the time is that it's not a crazy like dopamine halo effect in the brain that we have these experiences. They're going on with or without our knowledge all the time. Right? The spirit world is around us all the time, whether or not we perceive it to be such. And so it's factual. Like you had this experience with your wife, and so she was there. Of course she was there. And it's not like, wow, what a crazy thing that we shared it. It's like, no, the window was open and they could see through to the actual world outside that window.
Oh,
and I mean, how beautiful. It's not that the window doesn't exist in the world outside. It isn't real. It's that our attention is in the house. But sometimes that window opens and we get to see through that window to the reality that's going on outside.
I love that. Yeah. And some people are able to see, but it's there. Some things are true, whether you believe them or not. Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. And that was part of the near-death experience. That was early on. And perhaps the most profound thing happened at the end of my hospital stay. I had so many experiences in the hospital. I mean, I learned the true value of family and friends. I mean, my brothers came and sat with me. They practically lost their jobs to come and sit with their brother. And so many experiences with that. And my mother and my father and my workmates, and there was so much support and love. It's also worth pointing out that the two most profound experiences were at the scene of the accident, before all the morphine and narcotics were given.
Right.
And then at the end of my hospital stay, when I was off of all the heavy narcotics. In fact, I was out of ICU, obviously. I was out of surgical recovery. I was out of regular hospital. I was in the rehabilitation wing. And I was about ready to come home. I mean, I was going to make it. I was certainly going to live at this point, and I wasn't dying. I was a mess. I mean, my left leg was amputated. There was infections with that. My right knee, they had tried to repair the fractures and crushing of that leg, and it was in a brace sticking straight out. My right arm was in a sling. They had reconnected all the muscles, and they were doing this strange shock therapy, trying to get the nerves to regenerate into the muscle so I'd have some use of the right arm. And I had a colostomy bag handling, all the ruptured intestines. I mean, I was still a mess, but I was going to go home. And I was finally able to sleep on my side. They had stabilized, my abdomen. And I had laid so long on my back that I'd rubbed all the hair off the back of my head. I was bald on the back of my head. My brothers were giving me all kinds of grief about that and teasing me, and they were good. They kept it, real and sometimes lighthearted, even though it was so hard. And I had grieved so miserably. I mean, the grief was so intense, and especially over my little boy, Griffin. And without getting into details, his car seat had broken apart. He was ejected from the car, and I knew that. And it's anyway, the grief, it was. And so here I am in the hospital, and I'm finally able to sleep on my side, but the grief was so heavy. Even though I knew I was going to be well, I was going to come home. And that made it sometimes worse. Like, how am I going to go home, to an empty house and raise my son from a wheelchair? What am I going to do here? So that was kind of the state. But on this particular night, as I laid on my side, I fell asleep. And yet it's strange because in my sleep, I became aware or conscious that, wow, I'm sleeping peacefully. Now, I had slept and I'd certainly been unconscious, but I was aware of the peaceful sleep I was in. And at that moment, I felt that light come again. Just like at the accident, this light came and just surrounded me. It was comforting me in my grief. It felt as if I was rising above the hospital bed. It was that same lift. However, this time the light dispensed. It like dispersed like a fog. Like when a fog clears, the light dispersed. And I was in the most gorgeous, beautiful place. People use words like heaven, the spirit world, the other side. The only word that comes close to what I experienced is I was home. I mean, I was home. It was so familiar, so welcoming. So I was home, and also I was whole. I looked down, I had both legs and both feet, and there was no colostomy bag or braces, and I actually began to run.
Wow.
I was running, and it was such a physical, for lack of a better word, such a sensual experience. I could feel the energy of the ground beneath my feet. I could feel the intelligence in every toe and calf and thigh, and I'm running just gleefully, like, oh, I'm home and I'm whole. And it was at that moment that I got the message, you're not here to stay. And there was this corridor. I knew, I'm to go down this way. I'm to go down this corridor. And I began making my way down the corridor, and at the end of the corridor was a crib. Now, Griffin, my toddler, had still been sleeping in a crib, and he was sneaking out of it and causing trouble at night, mischievous as they get. But this crib intrigued me. I'm like, I got to get to that crib. And so I raced to the crib and I looked in. And there was my little boy. And he was sleeping as peacefully as when I glanced in the rearview mirror. It was the same recall. I'm like, gosh, look at him. He's a miracle. And look how long his eyelashes are. And look, I mean, just beautiful boy. And so I swept him up as any parent would. And it was so real, so physical. I mean, if you've ever picked up a sleeping child, there's a weight and there's a heat, to him. And I picked up my little boy and I held him close, and he was solid against me, and I could feel his little rib cage expanding with breath. I could feel his breath on my neck. And again, the senses seemed to be multiplied. I reached over and I smelled his hair. And I don't know if you've ever done that with someone you love. It's like, oh, it's him. It's him. And I began to weep, and I'm holding my little boy. And as I did that, there was this intense presence behind me, this overwhelming, cosmic, wise, powerful presence. And it was coming closer and closer and closer. And I'm holding my boy and weeping, thinking, I really get to hold him one more time. I really get to be here with him. And then the guilt started bubbling up, I'm like, wow, his life was cut short because I screwed up and crashed the car. I mean, he's here because I dozed off or overcorrected, and as all that guilt's bubbling up, this presence is right behind me, and I'm frightened. I don't dare turn around. And what I was thinking was, that's God, and I'm in so much trouble. I have failed as a father. I have failed at life. I have, and I'm having all these, judgmental thoughts. And I actually had the thought, I hope somehow I can be forgiven. And when I had that thought, and this almost felt physical too, just these divine arms wrapped around and held me and my little boy. And that's when just this download came. It's like the lid just came off. I mean, we became one. Like my little boy was part of me, and I became part of God, and we became part of everything there is. And the first thing that was communicated in that thought, I hope I can be forgiven, was the message, there's nothing to forgive. Everything is in divine order. Now, me being me, I began to argue, oh, how can that be? How can that be? He's here. I failed the test of life. I believed that. It's like life was a test and the angels were keeping score, and I had certainly failed. And yet in that, I was told life is not a test. It's a gift. It's a gift. And so here I was arguing it can't be in divine order. There has to be something bigger and more. And then my life kind of unfolded before my eyes, they say. I started to see my life, and I saw my parents divorce when I was young. I saw the insecurities that created in me, all 4 years old. And I became the kid that was going to get the grade and make the team and get the girl and get the car and get the house and get the job. And, all just insecurities of the nonsense of wanting to prove that I was okay or that I was enough. And yet I saw it in such love. I even saw things and I'm like, yeah, that was a mistake. I didn't mean to do that. And what I was asked by the Creator was, what did you learn? There was no judgment. There was only love. Like, what did you learn? And I was seeing things so differently based on, I made that choice. And yet, wow, I gained wisdom. I learned, and I saw things. I even thought, well, that was wrong. I knew it was wrong, and I did it anyway, And this beloved Creator, the Father, the God that held me, said, that's your judgment of it. We love you. And then, there I am holding my little boy, who's perfect. He's divine to me. He's beloved. He's all of it. And it was like magnified, like all the love I had for him, I'm feeling in the beloved arms of this Almighty, and it was magnified, and it was a very personal experience, but I knew it rippled out to every living soul, every one. And there was so much love. And I was given a tutorial on choice. I now say the only cosmic rule is we have free will. That's the only cosmic rule. But I was told I could be mad at God the rest of my life, because the accident happened and I didn't get inspiration. I mean, Tamara was told, go hug your mom and dad one more time. And I didn't. Why wasn't I told, pull the car over, stop the car, and I could be mad at God the rest of my life for that. And that would be okay. They would love me still. And I was told I could be mad at myself and beat myself up the rest of my life because I was driving the car, and that would be okay. They would love me still. But I was given another choice, and this was something that was very difficult for me to talk about, because God said to me, I want you to exercise your will. And I'm like, well, wait a minute, it's your will be done. I've been taught that since I was a little boy. And what was relayed to me is God said, my will is your will. That's how much I love you. My will is that you have free will, that you get to choose. And you can give your son back. You can exercise your will and hand him over and trust. And it might not feel like he was ripped away from you. And you can do that with your wife as well. And in all that love, all that peace, all that beauty, all that joy, all that clarity, just truth. I kissed my little boy and I handed him over. I gave him back. And, then boom, back in the hospital bed to all the injuries and all the nonsense. And yet there was a deeper perspective, maybe a higher perspective. And it didn't change everything. I mean, I don't want anyone to think I had this horrible accident, had these spiritual experiences, and then I was fine. No, it was a horrible accident. I had profound experiences, and I grieved like anybody else would. However, I knew there was no death. It wasn't theology. I had been there. I had experienced it. And I knew there was only love. Wasn't theology. I'd been there. I had experienced it. In fact, it overturned and turned inside out everything I thought I believed. I believed that life was a test. God was keeping track and that I could never measure up. And even if, I couldn't make it on my own, if someone was going to save me, and yet it was so different. It's like, oh no, you are beloved. You are my child. And you're simply there to learn. And we love you enough to allow you to have the experience. In fact, as I'm asking the why questions, well, why? It's almost as if I created it, like God was communicating, this was your soul's journey. You created it. And Tamara and Griffin loved you enough to leave so that your soul would expand in the ways you wanted. And that's how much you're loved. Like there was nothing but love. It all was love.
Thank you for listening to part 1 of Jeffrey Olsen's story. There's so much more we want to discuss. Stay tuned for our next episode to hear the rest of this incredible story. And don't miss the show notes to hear more about our upcoming in-person retreat and workshop this fall.